Hi, my name is Walker. I started a company called Loneshark, and today we are launching our first product. It's just to find out what users want from a buy now, pay later debt tracker, and it's a Notion template. You can um, follow the links in the bio to find out how to get access to our template and give feedback on the template. In order to celebrate this release of the template, I wanted to create this series called 10 Things I Learned from Being Broke. And that's because I don't really see in the media a lot people talking about how they get by when they just have what they need. I think there's a lot of focus on overconsumption, on having more than you need, on being rich, and sort of this glamorization. And well, it is glamorous, I suppose. It doesn't need much glamorization, but romanticization of being rich. When, being broke there's nothing actually wrong with it. We just have this stigma around it. It's actually a normal part of life. Like anyone who's ever owned a business knows that the first thing you do is go into debt. Um, anyone who's been on maternity leave, anyone who's been caring for someone else, anyone who's been a student or at different times in our lives, like it's just a normal part of our life. Yet we never really talk about it. We never really give each other support around it. I never really got much support for wanting to live a life that was just about meeting my own needs. And not giving into a lot of the pressure to live a large life. The first thing I wanted to say about what I learned from being broke is that when I decided that I wanted to move out of my family home, and I mean, I was in my 30s at this point. I'd been through a long period of study, which meant for me living in share houses and at home as well. And I got to the point where I was almost being kicked. I was basically being kicked out by my cousin, but also I didn't want to live there anymore. So I started to live in hostels and get by in any way that I could. I didn't have a job. So I kind of hit rock bottom as soon as I started paying for nightly for places to stay. Yeah, that money went pretty quickly. I learned pretty quickly that actually what I wanted in those moments was just a friend. I didn't really need the money. Like I was okay with not having money. After a few days, I got used to not having any money, and I got used to the $25 that I had to live on for that week. And, that's, and make choices around that. And suddenly life became like very small and I didn't have a lot of options. So that in a way, that kind of opened up all this freedom. I just had time. During that time, you would think that was a really horrible period for me. And sometimes it was. Like sometimes I just cried and I felt very alone. I was in a different city from Sydney. I lived in Perth at that time. I didn't know many people. I didn't have many places to go that were just like safe for me. And I, just learned that money would not have fixed the particular problem that I was having, even though it would have been really nice. And it would have meant that I could have spent money on food and accommodation. It wouldn't bring me a person that would be understanding and compassionate to my situation in that moment. And I just learned, not from reading a book, not from watching TV, not from someone telling me, but in my own way, in a bodily sense, as an experience that changed my life, that money was not what I really needed in my life. And up until then, I'd always thought, I just need to get a good job. I just need to get a good job. Um, but after that moment, I realized that a job is not everything. And, a high paying job was not exactly what I needed. I need a lot more than that in terms of connection, in terms of building relationships and friendships and just talking to people every day and having that camaraderie, being able to express myself, having some freedom around, my hobbies and not feeling that I can't say or do anything. So that time in my life, even though if you had looked at me on paper, you would have said, okay, this person is a complete loser. They have nothing going on at the moment. I still had some prospects. I was highly educated. It was a pretty interesting time for me personally in terms of personal growth. I learned I was becoming an energy healer. I did this training course, and to be honest, like I felt that I was getting paid every day from the energy around me. It was just like incredible. I was being really supported um, when nothing else and no one else was there. You know, I was feeling something and having a very different experience than you would expect. I was having a really supported and beautiful experience actually. So I think the lesson here is that sometimes the periods of learning to live without money can be some of the most freeing times in your life, some of the most surprisingly beautiful times in your life. I think people don't talk about that enough, and people don't accept that enough, that there is a validity in not wanting to overconsume or wanting to live within your means. And the other thing that I learned from that time is that I needed to surround myself with people who really supported me no matter what, you know, with or without a good job, with or without money. I actually started to think about cash a bit differently at that time and think about cash as sort of a currency that um, friends and people who talk to each other use. You know, if you just give people a smile and a how are you and a little bit of compassion, then that's cash that could keep me going for a morning or a day, and that could make my day. So that was more important to me than making $5 or starting a new starting a new menial job. In this series, I'm going to share more of my experiences of being broke. I think a lot of the time when we talk about personal finance, we often talk about investment, personal investment, and I'm like, I don't have any money to invest. So like I still, you know, it's been 5 years or so and since I started learning about investing, and I still don't have any money to invest. I think there's a room for people to talk about how do we make an extra $50 at the end of the week or the end of the payday? Like, how do we deal with the money stress around not sometimes not being able to make bills, or sometimes not knowing if you can make bills? How can we talk about that in a more in a normalizing way rather than in a way that's like this is the anomaly and it's unusual because it's a stupid thing to do. You shouldn't have a problem with being able to make your bills because that makes you stupid. You know, I think there's a lot of stigma around being broke and that I want to address. I'm Walker Cole. Welcome to my series, 10 Things I Learned from Being Broke. Thanks for watching. See you next time.